Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Stevens with RedMonk, and today we're going to be talking about how developers interact with databases. Now at RedMonk, we focus on developer-led technology adoption, and so we care a lot about the developer experience. And in the past life, before I joined RedMonk, I was actually a database administrator, so needless to say, I have a lot of opinions on this topic, and I'm really excited for our conversation today. With me today is Nick Van Wiggeren from PlanetScale, and he's going to bring some really expert perspectives to the table. So Nick, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Nick Van Wiggeren, and I'm the VP of Engineering here at PlanetScale. Prior to working at PlanetScale, I worked at GitHub and a number of other developer-focused kind of infrastructure companies. I've been having a blast so far building a great database product for developers. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, fantastic. We're so excited to have you, and I'm so excited to dive into this topic. But before we do, can you maybe just give all of our audience some background on PlanetScale and what problem PlanetScale is trying to solve?
I'd love to. So at its core, PlanetScale is a MySQL-compatible serverless database. And to understand what all of those words mean, I kind of want to go back to talking about software as a whole. And over the last decade or so, developers have really gotten a lot of superpowers as part of the development process. There's been a ton of work done to make sure people can stay productive, ship software quickly and safely. And out of frustration at all of the companies that a lot of us at PlanetScale have worked at, we realized that databases hadn't really kept up. Databases weren't following the rest of the stack. They were difficult to use. Changes required, opening a Jira ticket or kind of going and making some trades to make sure you could get done what you needed. And we wanted to bring databases kind of into the 21st century. So we set out to build PlanetScale as a ground up cloud database that actually has the UX and all of the pieces that developers need to be productive, but also is built from kind of open source core components that power some really, really big websites already.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about the modern database experience, I think your underpinning Vitess open source core is a really important part of that story. Could you tell us a little bit about your open source heritage?
Yeah, I'd love to. So a ton of our website, a lot of the functionality and kind of how we're able to provide PlanetScale is built on a lot of open source technology. And at the core of that is, as you said, Vitess. And so Vitess is kind of storied MySQL management software. It's a layer that sits on top and orchestrates MySQL. It started at YouTube, and now it's used by a bunch of kind of hyperscale companies. And what it allows us to do is really make MySQL do some fantastic things that it doesn't normally want to do. So we can scale it out. We can kind of use it in deployment topologies that otherwise would be very difficult. And it really speeds up our ability to deliver kind of a quality cloud product by leveraging Vitess, Kubernetes, and a ton of other open source products.
Fantastic. And it really sounds like you have focused a lot on the developer experience. And that's one of the things that we at RedMonk have really been watching with interest is what we call the developer experience gap of all of the things that make it difficult for a developer to get something that is written on their laptop all the way through to production. And the data story is, I think, as you referenced in your opening, just a perpetual pain point that really hasn't evolved at nearly the same speed as the rest of the application development process. And so I was a DBA, like a decade ago at this point. And the way that we're building apps between now and 10 years ago is just a night and day difference in terms of how we're actually doing things. But I could probably still jump into a lot of databases and continue to do things the same way that I used to do them 10 years ago, which is an interesting thing because it's made it really difficult for the application development process to have data be incorporated. And we are seeing that data is a more and more important driver for having data-driven applications, personalization, customization, real-time data components at the edge, and all kinds of things that are people trying to get their applications to do with technology that is really has been resistant to change in a lot of ways. And so I'm really excited to hear and see what you all are doing for the developer experience. Let's jump into a demo and have you show people what it's actually like to get a PlanetScale database up and running.
Yeah, I'd love to. Let's go meet me over at the PlanetScale website.
Awesome.
Share my screen now. Chrome tab, PlanetScale. All right, see that?
I sure do.
Okay, awesome. All right, so here we have the PlanetScale website as a new signed up user would see it. So I'm going to go through the core flow of PlanetScale. I'm going to create a database and show off some of the amazing developer UI and UX that we've built on top of it. So it may be no surprise, but I have done this before. So I'm going to go ahead and skip the walkthrough and create my database. So as we can see here, the path from 0 to 1 is really just a couple of clicks. I'm going to call this DemoDB and spin it up in Northern Virginia and go ahead and click Create Database. And while this is happening, what's going on behind the scenes is that PlanetScale is going and orchestrating an entire new Vitesse cluster on Kubernetes, pulling it down, setting up all of the containers and things like that. It's quite a bit of work to get here. You've got leaders, you've got followers, replicas and things like that, but we're able to do it. And as you can see, somewhere between 15 and 30 seconds, thanks to a lot of hard work that we've done. And that's one of those, I think, developer productivity things that we really, really value is these kinds of things should be quick. Gone are the days of starting a database up and having it take an hour, having it be a ticket, a business day. We strive to give people databases pretty much as quickly as possible. So as we can see here, I've got my DemoDB, and I want to talk about a couple of concepts. Again, when we talk about developer UI and UX, the biggest place that databases fail today is change management. So you can set up a database, create a schema, but changing that schema is very difficult. So we've introduced this concept of the branch flow here. So just like you change your code, you check out a new branch, you make some changes, you push that branch up and see what the difference looks like. We've brought that over to databases as well. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to our main branch and just kind of show off a little bit about the database itself. So you can see, as I said, we've already got a console. And we can see I've got a empty table here. Let's go ahead and make some schema. So now that I've got this empty database, I'm going to go ahead and create a single table in it to demonstrate some of the branching flow. So we've got a persons table with some basic information, and I'm going to go ahead and execute this on PlanetScale. Now that I've run this query, I'm going to promote the branch. And what that means is now I can't run direct schema changes on it. It's locked and it's ready for production. So I'm going to go ahead and click promote, and that will take a couple seconds. And what's happening right here is we are kind of upgrading and changing the branch so that it's ready for production traffic. And this also unlocks the ability to do our online schema change workflow. So if I go over here, I can see that I've got that one table that I created. And now I'm going to do the fun thing, which is create a branch from main. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to call it dev off of my main branch. And I'm going to go ahead and create that branch. And just like when we made that first branch, I've now got an entire Vitesse cluster spinning up just for this dev branch so that I can go ahead and make schema changes. So that's going to take a few seconds to initialize. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to start that cluster up. It's going to take the schema from main, and it's going to go ahead and add it. So if I go back to this dev branch now, I can see that I've got my persons table here already. I can go into the console. And because it's a dev branch, I can do something like drop the table. Looks good. And I can go ahead and now create what we call a deploy request, which is similar to a merge request or a pull request. So I can go over here. I can look at my branches. I can go to dev and create a deploy request. And what that will do is it will go ahead and it will actually diff the two schemas. So I can see what schemas have changed between my main branch and my dev branch. And I could go ahead and merge it just like I would a pull request. So as we can see, PlanetScale has detected I've removed the persons table. It gives me a summary of that, and it will actually go ahead and check to make sure that that deploy request is deployable. I won't go through the rest of the details, but you can think of this as the introduction of a real change workflow that works with the developer. Just like they change their code, they can change their database. And what we want to be able to do really is to speed up the ability for a developer to focus on what their business needs and not what their technology is limiting them to do. We do dozens of schema changes every day. We do it without worrying about the impact it's going to have on our production database because these are zero downtime deploys done automatically by PlanetScale in the background. And they're capable of helping us figure out what we need to do. And we want to give that same ability to developers. So thank you for looking. There's a bunch of other features I'd love to demo, but I don't want to bore everyone. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Oh, that's not boring at all. It's amazing. Someone who has dropped tables in production in the past, like having that Git workflow of showing you a diff would be just it's an amazing workflow. And I think it's really interesting to see like this concept of versioning and like just the Git flow that we're used to in the development cycle actually start to make its way into the database. And what I love about this in particular, so like when I used to have to do all my change management for my database, like I had to physically print out all of my schema changes and all of my user changes, like all of those things. I physically had to have a paper copy of all of them so that I could pass my internal audits, because that was the world that I lived
That's
in.
awesome.
And so like it's amazing to see these great advances of like let's be more flexible, let's have guardrails in place so that we can do things well, but also that we can bring this velocity into the data side of our application development and actually start to build more robust and better processes around our database. So I think that's really exciting. Do you want to talk about, so it sounds like you kind of started to allude to your serverless operating model in there, but do you want to talk to us a little bit more about what it means to create a dev branch, and how are these dev tools priced, and is it something where I'm all of a sudden going to branch something and have an explosive bill?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as part of being the database for serverless, and as part of meeting developers where they want to be in 2021, one of the things we really felt strongly about was giving a pricing model that matched that. So instead of charging a flat fee for the amount of resources you're consuming, instead of kind of charging, per minute or per hour to run the database, we actually charge you based on what you use. So every time you run a query, a read query, or a write query, we can bill you an incredibly fine-grained kind of piece by piece, query by query, read or write by write. And that actually enables us to kind of offer a pay-as-you-go model and really scales with the company. So as you drive more traffic, PlanetScale scales with you, the price scales with you, but you don't have to worry about this big upfront cost. We actually believe with our free tier that you can get all the way to running a real company with real users without paying us a dime. And we believe really strongly in that because we think that developers deserve great tools, and developers deserve, to be able to go create and not to worry about saving a nickel, saving a dime, or anything like that on cobbling together what's free. We want to give people what's best, and we want to let that scale with them.
I love it. The idea of giving developers the ability to be productive is, I think, if you kind of think of like the Jeff Lawson view of like ask your developer and the power that developers have in the enterprise today in order to drive change, to drive business value, I think creating a world where you can make your developers more productive is a great investment.
Totally. And you mentioned, printing out, running through change boards and stuff like that. If you think of all the friction that in the last 10 years we've been able to cut out of deployment, no more printing out your deploys, no more running those by a change board. With CI/CD, you can go from 0 to production in a minute. We ship dozens of times a day, but oftentimes I've found entire features have been stopped or delayed because while you can ship the code, you can't ship the database changes, you can't scale the database. And at the end of the day, I think as a developer and as a company with a bunch of developers at it, all I want, or for the people that I work with, to be able to get what's in their head out into the world, to build a business, to build a website. And it's really important that we give developers the tools to let them do that so that they can get that creativity out instead of kind of getting stuck in the kind of mire that is, finding all of the right tools and finding all of the right ways to just get something working.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking with us today about just the developer and database interaction and how you are envisioning that changing at PlanetScale. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.